Hello everyone, myself V.V.Gopala, Assistant Professor, Department of Computer Applications, Aditya University. Okay, today I am going to tell you the topic, the web and HTTP. That is the title of today's topic, the web and HTTP. Let us find out what are the outcomes we are expecting after completion of the lesson. So, here we are going to see what is actually the overview of a web. Why do you call it as a web and what are the basics in the web? So, that we are going to consider, and what actually the full form of HTTP and what are the basics of that. Why do we go for HTTP? That also we are going to see, and how the HTTP is going to carry out the steps for conducting actual transaction, and what are the different types of the actual processes called non-persistent and persistent processes, and what are the differences among them. So, that actually we are going to find out in this lesson. Okay, let us start the overview. So, it is actually web is actually the word, but actually the full form is World Wide Web. So, World Wide Web is shortly called as WWW. So, generally if you want to get any resources from the actual Google, so you have to actually type a link. So, that link is basically starts with the World Wide Web kind of a pattern. So, that is why we actually recommend to type www followed by the domain name, so that so your request can be carried to the actual the server, and from the server you are able to get the information. So that the World Wide Web is the basically the place where the communication can takes place in course of methods. So, that is why this is called as a web kind of an architecture you called. So, it is a distributed system. That means what? Distributed system means different systems are isolated and they are connected, so that the transaction or the communication can take place among all different types of systems. So, thereby you can find like a web kind of an architecture. So, but the systems which are actually isolated and because they are connected, so totally the architecture can be called as a distributed system, because they are isolated but they are connected. So, that is why this is called a distributed system, which is an interconnected system, which is for actually access of the documents and resources via internet. Why it is called as the internet here? Because already I told you in the previous sessions, internet is nothing but network of networks, where several networks can be coming to the closure, and so that any network can able to interact with any other network, so that it is called as an internet. For what reason we are going to do this job? For actually sharing the resources in the form of documents or in the form of any other format. So, that is why it is called as an accessibility. So, that the World Wide Web is the place where you can interact or you can access whatever the resource you want. So, now who is going to serve this? So, then in this case I can call that a protocol which is HTTP. The full form of HTTP is Hypertext Transfer Protocol, which is for communication purpose. It is actually for communication purpose. That means you have to communicate what is actually your requirement. So, then only the other device can able to serve you as per your requirement. So, that is why the HTTP is responsible for communication. That means from your side what do you want, so that you can get what actually you require. So, that is why HTTP is a very important protocol which is available in or which you can refer in this case of www. Then in this case of web pages, there is HTML, one language is there, hypertext markup language, which is actually a language responsible for creating web pages. So, what actually the speciality in the web page when compared to the normal page? generally a normal page will find you find some running text, you can find and that is called as a normal page. But whereas in the web page, so instead of a normal text, some at some area, at some portions you can also find hypertext. Hypertext means what? It is a kind of text which can take you to some other location in the World Wide Web. So that is why that text is called as hypertext. But here, to create such a kind of a web page, there should be one language which has to give you some support. In that case, I can call that HTML is the language which gives you some support to create web pages, so that in the web page you can include any text or any image or any videos or any other links if you want to communicate, if you want to transmit, or if you want to give some kind of information to the other side, then that is possible, that you can accommodate in the hypertext markup language. So that is why HTTP is for communication protocol, and whereas HTML is to create web pages, to actually include whatever the portion you want to communicate to the other side. Okay, I hope you are clear about HTTP and HTML. Now moving to the other thing, how the hypertext, that means HTTP, hypertext transfer protocol, is going to follow an architecture. So generally HTTP is available in the application layer, the protocol suite. Of course, this is we only focus on the web communication. Then this communication is basically done by using a model called as a client server model. So here the client is a system where the request will be carried out, the request will be taken up from the client only. That means a device or a system or a browser from where the request is actually initiated is called as a client. That is the way how you can able to designate among all set of the systems, which system can be called as a client. I will tell you that a system in which the browser is going to put a request is referred here as a client. Then why do you request? Because you want some service, then it is to be carried to the concerned resources area. From there you have to get the response. Then now you have to see that the request is now traveling to the other side. So from there you are going to get the response. That means that particular the system which is going to serve you the requirements can be called as a server here in the computer networks terminology. So in this case of the server, it is nothing but a system or a device in which resources are available and which responds to the actual request which is made by the client. So client and server are both very important as far as the transaction which is following a model called as client server model, in which you are going to find out the request and its response. So suppose I want to get some kind of a file. Suppose if I put the request, I want so and so file, so then the respective server is going to respond and it is going to serve the actual the file what you require, that is called response. So then in this case, whatever the request you are putting, then your system can be referred as a client. Some from which server you are getting going to get the response can be referred as the server here. I hope you are clear about what actually the server and what actually the role of a client in the client server model. Of course, to make you better understand, I am going to show you the actual picture in which you are going to see how the client server model is going to follow the request and response, the transaction or an activity which is showing on the actual screen on the figure. So here in this case, a PC running Firefox browser, and there is a server, and there is one more device that we are identifying is called iPhone running Safari browser. So why I am calling it as a browser? Already I told you that. So you are not limited to a single browser. So in the World Wide Web, you want to, if you want to interact with any resources, if you want to go for any resources, you can go with any browser you want. So let us say for the actual differentiation of the browsers sake only I have mentioned that Firefox browser and Safari browser, but doesn't mean that you should always follow Firefox or you should always follow Safari browser. So depending on the requirement, depending on the availability of the browsers you have in your system, so you can able to go with the respective browser to access or to interact with the World Wide Web. So in this case of the first case, suppose you see that PC running Firefox browser, that means that fellow is using Firefox browser. By using Firefox browser, so a request is made to the server here. So now that particular activity is shown in this like this. That means I am showing that the portion that is circled is nothing but the request made by the PC by using a Firefox browser. Then this request is actually reaching to the other side, and that is called the server here. That is called the server. That means once the request is reaching to the other side, then to whom it is going to actually be addressed? So only to server, because server is having the resources, so that it is responsible to give the response to the actual request made by the PC in the picture. So in this case the PC is nothing but the client, but whereas the tower which is shown in the figure, which is actually using the Apache web server, and that server is nothing but a real server where the resources are available, so that it can able to give you a response based on the request that is made by the actual PC. So if you see the topmost the interaction between the PC and the server, so there is the client server model what I explained in the previous slide. So in this case the PC is called the client is made a request through HTTP, and the request is carried to the server, and because the server is having the corresponding response resources, so automatically the server is going to respond. So that is why it is HTTP response, you can see in the figure. Now here sometimes you need not stick on to only PC, sometimes you can put a request through mobile also. So that is why there is an iPhone here you are finding in the picture, and through iPhone also you can put a request, but iPhone may not have Firefox browser, or iPhone may go for different browsers which are actually configured in that particular system. So that the iPhone may, let us for the purpose of example, the iPhone is using a Safari browser. Using the Safari browser, iPhone is going to put a request which is actually shown in this, and this request is again going to the same server which is actually shown in the above scenario, and the server, because it is having the responses, it is because it is having the resources available, so that it can respond, so that based on the request made by the iPhone, because the server is having the resources which can respond to the iPhone in the other activity. So that here also whatever it is in the client server model, irrespective of the actual device and its configuration and its structure, but here you have to remember that any system that claims or that actually put a request can be called as a client, and any device where resources are available and which can serve for the actual purpose of the client can be referred here as the server. So here the client server architecture or model is very important, which is actually been controlled, which is actually been taken up by HTTP in the form of a request and response structure. And in this case you are not limited to only PCs or iPhones, server to server also communication can take place. So one server which is not having the resources may request the other server to serve for its requirement, so that between server to server also the request and response can take place. So that basically the client and server is a model which says about one system has to put a question, the other system has to give an answer. So that is called the request and response structure you refer here. So but here in this case of the client server model, So sometimes for better connectivity, so the connections can be classified into non-persistent and persistent connection. What the actual the information is saying that non-persistent connections create a new connection for each and every request. For example, you see earlier example, the PC, there is an iPhone. Let us say from PC, if I want to make 2 requests, then I can do it in 2 ways. One is individually I can put request by request, that is one method, or 2 requests in a single phase I can able to put. Then in that case, suppose if I put each and every request separately, then it can be referred as a non-persistent connection. No, I want to put all my requests in a single phase, then I can call that connection as a persistent connection. Suppose if you read out the information which is shown in the slide, non-persistent connections create a new connection for each request that actually for the object. So means what? Suppose I want to know 2 jobs. So 2 jobs I have to done by putting 2 requests separately. So that is called non-persistent. Persistent connections allow multiple objects to be sent over the same connection, improving efficiency. So instead of going for separate individual independent requests, suppose I want to put 2 requests or 2 or more requests in a single connection, that is also possible. Then in that case it is called persistent connection, but it is only for the sake of improve the efficiency of the connection which actually established between the systems. So that what I am going to say is that these persistent, non-persistent connections are over, and other what is the actual role of HTTP. So these things are actually covered. Now of course after completion of the lesson, I want to be clear about the student is able to know about the overview of web, and I hope that HTTP and its basics are also known to the student, the full form of HTTP and what is the role of the HTTP in carrying out the application is also clear, I hope. And finally, the steps followed in the request and response phase which is identified in the client server model, and also I am clear about that non-persistent, persistent connections are also explained to you. I think you are clear about this particular point. Thank you.